You're listening to the Perth Property Show, Australia's only weekly property podcast by West Australian experts for West Australian listeners. Catch your latest episode every Monday at 7 a.m.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Perth Property Show. My name's Trent Fleskins, your host. As always, this week we're dipping straight into a suburb spotlight. It's been a few weeks and we've never covered this suburb in 314 weeks. That's right, 6 years this podcast has been running for. And it's one that I think a lot of people drive past often if they live in the northern suburbs, especially if they work in the city. It's Joondanna, as you would know. And the one man I want to speak about Joondanna with is Ralph Seymore from the agency. Ralph, thanks for coming in, mate.
Hi, Trent. Thank you for having us.
Joondanna is a suburb I think a lot of people wouldn't even realise they've driven past when they do.
No, they don't.
But it is actually, I think, quite a special suburb because it sits, in my mind, at the precipice of inner ring in Perth. I'm sure you'll explain more for us, but you've got Yokine, you've got Coolbinia, Menora, Mount Hawthorn, all these beautiful suburbs around. It often gets overlooked, I think, because you just drive straight past, but it actually has some of the best views in Perth when you're looking at the city, doesn't it?
That's correct, yes. We've got beautiful views when you sit on Joondanna Drive. When you go through Robert Street, there's stunning views. It's the best views you can have of the city or the hills.
Other than maybe Doubleview, it's probably one of the highest parts of Perth. Dog Swamp sits at the bottom of that hill.
Yeah, lovely
Unfortunate name, isn't it?
Such a nice name.
But it is the local.
It is. It's brilliant. Everything is there.
If you drive past Dog Swamp, you're in Joondanna, right?
Yeah, you're basically going past Joondanna right there.
Now, the other special part about it is, for me, I think it's a precipice suburb when it comes to price points. The second you go further south, it can start getting pretty expensive for people. You start going further north and people, as I said, start to think, well, I'm probably not really in the prestigious suburbs. Some parts of Yokine certainly are, but you keep going further north and it's sort of middle Perth. Joondanna, I think, is that accessible first step into the nice parts of Perth, if you want to call it that way. And that's how I see it is. You're doing pretty well for yourself in Joondanna, but it's also still a pretty accessible suburb for most double income 30s, 40-year-olds who have been working hard.
That's correct, yes. Most of our people coming in at the moment are young couples, starting their first property, getting close to the city. We're only 6 kilometers. So that makes a huge difference. The fact that Mount Hawthorn sits next to us makes it absolutely sought after. So if you can't afford Mount Hawthorn, you're welcome in Joondanna.
It's a bit of a spillover suburb, you reckon, like a ripple effect?
Absolutely.
And
yeah, absolutely.
Has that been happening over the last few years, as we've certainly seen Mount Hawthorn? I reckon we've seen about 50, maybe even 60% growth in Mount Hawthorn since COVID. That starts to price a lot of people out whose incomes haven't grown that much, right? Have you seen a lot of that story where people are crossing Green Street? I
would say 80% of the people in Joondanna would love to move over into Mount Hawthorn. So the best place to start is Joondanna. 2 years ago, maybe a little bit more, it was super affordable to get into Joondanna. At the moment, we're following Mount Hawthorn absolutely on its heels, and it's getting really expensive there.
So you reckon it's the same aspirational buyer pool, and really it's just split up by affordability at the end of the day? If you want to live in that area, you probably are wanting to live in Mount Hawthorn, let's be honest. Mount Hawthorn is the precipice in, I think, that little pocket. But again, as you said, so many of those people actually end up just losing at the offering, at the negotiation table, or get to the negotiation table, realise, oh my lord, this is 300 grand more than I actually thought it was going to be. What's available in Joondanna?
That's correct, yes. We get a lot of people's feedback on the sales we do. Getting into Joondanna because Mount Hawthorn is super expensive. They start off there, then they work on their aspiration to get back into Mount Hawthorn. Some of them go to Mount Hawthorn, others just go to Karen up, getting a bit more space around the house for the kids. So it's a good start off for people who just started with being together, then a family and a dog, and then from there on they have to get a bit more space. Then they'll go to bigger plots of land.
When you talk about that starter block, it also for me speaks to the density that's coming through or has been through Joondanna for some time now. When you look at the mapping in Joondanna, and I've got layers on my mapping that show what's a survey strata block and what's not. And to be frank, I'd say that more than half of the properties in the suburb now have been subdivided. Would you say you can see that on the streets?
Yeah, we do see a lot of subdivision there, but it's been done many years ago.
Now it's not like it's fresh product, is it, a lot of it?
A little bit, nothing major, no. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of subdivision. At the moment, a lot of families are keeping or holding on to their blocks of land. They grew up there, mum and dad lived there, mum and dad might have gone to old age care, and they feel like we really love it, we don't want to sell it, and we're going to keep it in the family. But eventually it will sell. It's just in time.
It's not a big suburb. There's less than 5,000 people that live in this suburb. So the pool of transactions every year, if you're looking to arbitrarily get into Joondanna, I don't think you've got as many options as you would in Yokine, Tuart Hill, Balcutta, for example, right?
That's true. There's just a little bit in 5,000 people in the suburb. A lot of them are villas and units, and then you've got the houses. People selling houses are absolutely minuscule. There's not a lot of people prepared to sell their houses at the moment. I think they like it there. It's a really good suburb. If you're in it, you want to stay there. You can't really beat that. So close to the city and all the amenities around it. So yeah, I would say Joondanna is absolutely tops when it comes to something that you can go and live in with a family for the beginning.
Let's talk about price points and the products. So you mentioned there's villas, townhouses, the old full block. Where are we starting when it comes to price points on the cheapest product available in Joondanna? Do you have any old flats, apartment buildings in Joondanna at all, or does it really start at that house behind a house or triplex or quad?
Not a lot of units, but old units. That's
60s.
Few stories, in the 60s, which need a lot of love and care. But they are selling now, starting around the 400s. When I started there in the neighborhood, you would get something in the 200s, 150, 200,000. And now you're talking for the same thing, around 400.
One bedders?
Yeah, 1 and 2 bedders, in the units. And then when you jump over into villas, it's changed. We used to sell villas around the high 3s into the 400s. If it's done really well, like a little reno or something to it, you would get about
20, 30-year-old villas these are?
Even older than that,
Yeah,
60s,
okay.
70s, around there. That's really old, 80s, a lot of them.
You're right, it would have been some of the first subdivision done in Perth.
Correct. That would have sold for around the 400s. We just sold one recently, and it went for 640.
And are these 3x1s, 2x1s?
2x1.
Yeah, wow.
That's nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just the sought afterness of the properties there is massive.
Is that the price point, do you think? Did you have people lining out the door, or was it a discernible 3 or 4 people putting offers in?
There was a lot of viewers. We had about 30 or 40 on the first Saturday. And at the end of the day, I would say 3 of them competed. But then the one client was super keen on getting it. And they just absolutely floored it and got it. So yeah, that's not normal. It's a bit more than it should. But I mean, everything at the moment, well, not now, I would say a month or 2 ago, was super hot. You just open the door and everybody's just wanting to put in an offer.
What's changed in the last couple of months then?
The last 2 weeks have changed a lot. It's cooled down everywhere.
Do you think just leading into Christmas, when you're having conversations about, hey, why didn't you rock up? What's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Is it affordability? Is it buyer fatigue? People just giving up? Is it people going to renting? Is it people moving to maybe buying a house and land package, an apartment building? The people still exist, right? We're still transacting at 1,000 properties a week. 3 months ago, we were transacting at about 800 properties a week. So there are 25% more people buying every week right now. But as you and a couple of other people on the podcast have said, people are a little less aggressive when it comes to the FOMO side of buying in. You've figured out what that is yet? Because I'm still grappling for a really concrete answer as what's changed in the dynamic in the last month or two in spring selling season.
There's more choice. There's more properties on the market. A few weeks ago, we were looking at 3,000 properties. Now we're looking at 5,000.
Yep.
So they sort of are like, well, I'm not doing what you want me to do. Coming price. They will go and search somewhere else.
Yep.
Some of them come back and then they get back into the price range where we put it. But a lot of them do have the attitude at the moment where I'm not paying that.
So there's just a bit of pushback.
Yes.
Look, it's been crazy for a couple of years
Yes.
now. It was 400, it's now 600. Hold your horses for a second. Let's think about it. Is that a summary of what you're talking about?
It depends on the owner and the real estate agent that they're using. If you push really hard, they might just walk away. If you're really flexible, both sides are happy with the price, then you can sell it easier.
You're talking to that reality that over the last couple of years, I think any schmuck could have sold a house. And now it's coming back to that reality that, hey, you need a little bit of skill and effort just to sell that house within 2 weeks, which most people would be absolutely falling over their heels to do as an agent 5 years ago. Okay, so interesting to hear that dynamic. There's just more options out there at the moment. Again, we're talking about 5,500 properties, not 15,500 properties. So let's put that into perspective. But you're right, it does give people a chance to breathe for a second as a buyer or a prospective buyer out there. Think about whether they're making rational decisions rather than FOMO decisions.
Correct.
And especially coming into Christmas, I think you also have people just being a bit fatigued right now and going, you know what, let's just leave it till next year. It hasn't been working for us all year. But at the same time, given there's been more options, more properties available, I've also seen a lot of colleagues, friends, just general chit chat, that a lot of those people that have been looking for a couple of years now and have been unsuccessful. Well, the last 2 months has actually been their time where they've finally executed that purchase. They've made that decision and been able to successfully buy a home. Have you seen a little bit of that too, of people going, this is it, it's been a year and a half, thank you very much, we've finally got our family home now?
That's very true. We've had multiple buyers missing out, putting in offers, missing out, putting in offers, missing out. I would say 2 or 3 weeks ago, you shouldn't play a game. Just put in your best foot forward, get it done, get your money in there and buy the property. It's cooled down a little bit. I think now people are going to start to play a little bit more of the game. But yes, I think a lot of people are weary. They had enough. It's been tough. A lot of people we've sold to is like, mate, you were the fourth or the fifth offer we've put in. We had enough, which is fantastic for us as agents and for the clients, because that means that they learn now and they got to the point where they are prepared to just put your best foot forward, get it done.
Yeah, they've been conditioned in a way, haven't they? But
Conditioned,
it's also
but
not a
also,
great feeling.
Yeah, conditioned, but also at the point where they're like, okay, the market is hot. I have to do something. Because if you sell in a high and buy in a high, you're fine. If you sell in a low, buy in a low is fine. You're still in the same perimeters because everybody is paying what they're paying. It's just you need to do something. You need to get into the market. If you don't get into the market, it's going to get worse.
Let's get back to those housing options.
Yeah.
So we're in the 600s there for the older villas.
Yeah.
What's next?
Well, we've just sold a character in Osborne Street, which was phenomenal. The property, obviously when you do an appraisal for someone, you show them what I've sold in the neighborhood and what the price range should be. But then when you go to market, you ask them, guys, look, we're looking at a certain amount, which is definitely more than the market is prepared to give. And with this one, it went from, we were thinking around the 1 to 1.1 million. It ended up 1.25 million for a little character property in Joondanna.
There's really a gap there. Is
Huge.
there anything selling in that $900,000, $800,000 space?
A lot of stuff at the moment, I mean, average looking at what we've got on the books at the moment, a lot of them are in the nines, but then they pop into a million,
Okay.
1.1, 1.2.
That's interesting that you speak to that reality, because on one hand, you're saying things are cooled a little bit, but on the other hand, people are still paying what they have to get the property.
That's true.
Do you think that the competition has now shifted a little bit from the multiple offers of I've got to beat the 8 other people in front of me to the seller's not going to sell it for less than this? I just have to pay it, even if I'm only one of 2 or 3 people offering right now. Are we seeing discounting? Are you seeing sellers compromising? Because for 2-3 years, I think most sellers were not only not compromising, you were delivering 10% more than they even thought they were going to get. What's the dynamic now? Are they going, hey, Ralph, I reckon it's worth 1.1. Can you get me 1.15? And then you get 1.15, or do you get 1.2, or do you have to come back and say, look, guys, we got 1.1, and that's what it's going to be. Where is it in that scale for you right now in Joondanna?
No, we're actually getting more than we expected ourselves as agents.
So isn't that interesting that we're talking about that dynamic of having a little bit less heat in the market right now, but you're still overachieving?
Correct.
How do you explain that?
I just think the buyers we have at the moment are people who's already gone through the mill, and they understand that if they really want this property in this area, in this suburb, we need to put our best foot forward.
So the frenzy's probably not as much there. You're probably not having as many cleaning bills on the carpet as you used to, but the buyers are still deliberate, actioning, discernible people who go, what's the price I have to pay? And you say, well, what's this price? And they go, okay, well, here's this plus 30 grand. Let's get it done.
Yeah.
Yeah?
I would say the amount of people on a weekend has diminished. Now we're sitting with serious buyers, and you will have 2 or 3 or 4 serious buyers who's prepared to compete each other.
That's still enough.
Yeah, you just need that one person who's really keen on the property more than anyone else, and you will get your price.
So let's tick up again. So you're in the low ones for a character home. What's next?
Yeah. Well, we've seen a few bigger homes with blocks of land that have sold in the 1.3 million range. And then the last one we just sold on Joondanna Drive, which is a big house with massive views. That one went for 1,462,000. It's a young couple who bought it. They want to renovate and fix.
Does it go much further than that mid ones in Joondanna? Obviously, the median right now sits just under $1 million.
Yeah.
Where does it start to top out in Joondanna before people start going, I may as well be in Mount Hawthorn, Ralph?
I would say when you start to push above the 1.65, people are starting to say, look, in that case, I'm just popping over Green Street.
Yeah,
I'm going to...
Flinders or Coogee.
Yeah. There is definitely a pushback, which will in time diminish as well, because we are following Mount Hawthorn absolutely perfectly.
That's interesting. It's cool to see those microcosms and how they relate with each other, right? Because I'm sure that people in Chewett Hill, for example, would suggest they're doing the same thing with Joondanna.
Yeah. The streets close to Joondanna in Chewett Hill is starting to get really good prices. I've looked at blocks this morning that were selling there. Phenomenal prices they got in those blocks. And there's quite a few properties. We just sold one in Chewett Hill, very close. It was on Hector Street, corner of Myers and Hector. And that one went for 1.3 million. And it's just half a block. Beautiful home, stunning home. It's nothing wrong with that. That's stunning. But I mean, 1.3 Chewett Hill has changed.
Yeah, you didn't expect to see 7 figures in Chewett Hill.
Not that, not like that.
My understanding is the boundary for the Bob Hawke intake is Robert Street. Do you see a discernible price difference? Does it make a difference?
Makes a huge difference. Although people want to live in Joondanna, as soon as they know their kids can go to Bob Hawke, they just do not want to cross that line into over Roberts into, let's say, McDonald's.
So is that affecting, I guess, just the amount of people that rock up? Like, one side of the street, you got a home open, 20 people rock up. The other side of the street, same house, essentially, 5 people. Is that a reality, or is that overstating it?
No, I think that would be a reality. There's a lot of people buying in Joondanna for the sake of getting into Bob Hawke.
Riverton's a really good example where half of Riverton is in the Rossmoyne Senior High catchment. The other half is not. It's in the Linwood Senior High catchment. And there is a discernible value difference when you cross the road in Riverton. And I'd like to think that now that Bob Hawke's become a bit of a name, I think the evidence is starting to show that's happening in Joondanna as well.
Yeah, no, we can see that at the home opens, the questions that come out. One of the questions will be, is this in Bob Hawke?
Causes a bit of risk for you to make sure you get that right every time, right? Because that's the sort of stuff that an agent gets caught up with.
Yeah, no, you're right. Everything goes around the school when you have kids.
Why are people selling in Joondanna right now when they are?
When they sell, it would be to make just sea change, go to the hills, or they would like to get a bigger block because they can sell their property at a really good price. They can actually go to really nice areas closer to the beach or with bigger land value.
So it's a transitional suburb. It's one that you're upsizing and downsizing from based on your situation?
I would think it's more like someone who wants to upsize, going out of Joondanna to upsize.
Okay, so it really is that stepping stone.
Yes, it's an absolute stepping stone.
Then that's an interesting note that I guess people are trading in and out. I assume most people aren't holding property in Joondanna then just for the sake of it. It's a part of their life. It's a chapter of their life. And obviously Bob Hawke is a part of that story now when it comes to people staying for a certain period of time to get their kids through school, then going, look, we've done now, let's move to the next chapter.
That's correct, yeah. I would say older Italian homes where the family still owns it, they will stay there till who knows when. But other properties that sell, people do sell it because that's a good income for them to buy the next property.
Yeah.
We've done a lot of sales this year where it's subject to sale, or we really need to sell it as soon as possible because our offer has been accepted. And that was beautiful because they would buy the other property now and then they would sell Joondanna. And Joondanna would sell on a weekend.
Of course, you didn't have a lot of risk
in
that space. You know you're going to get that sale very
exactly.
quickly.
Your sale is happening.
Is a lot of subdivision happening in Joondanna? Is there much left to subdivide? When you drive around the streets 5 years ago, for example, in places like Westminster, Balga, Nollamara, which is up the road from Joondanna a few kilometres, you nearly couldn't go a street that didn't have a triplex getting built on it, right? Joondanna, obviously, as we mentioned earlier, was decades ago when it was initially starting to get developed. Do you have many, one or two around that are happening at the same time that you're speaking to developers that are putting product on the market? It sort of reminds me of Innaloo in a way. Innaloo's nearly all triplexed out, to be honest. Is there much left?
At the moment, the quantity coming loose is really low. There were 3 decent sales of properties that can be subdivided. One was a massive corner block that was sold recently on Pal and Banksia. And that one went for 1.8 million at an auction.
Wow.
Yeah, but you can put 4 properties on it. So that's not bad at all. The developer is going to develop it and make quite a bit of money out of it.
Are those guys building?
Well, they're going to demolish the old home that was there for the family, and they're going to then develop this.
It'll be interesting to see how they go about that, how long it takes for them to do that, because I think we've seen a lot of people land banking over the last few years, seeing obviously quality stock, that arbitrarily would be a good development site, but with construction risk, construction cost, and the FISO is not stacking up often, most are land banking and sitting on it until the right time. I'm wondering whether the right time is now, next year, for some of these people.
It depends when you speak to a developer. If they've got their own team that can come in and build for them, they get the materials at a good price, they got the team at a good price, they can build and sell it and make good money. Just an example, so that corner block that just sold on the auction, just up the street, like 4 or 5 houses up, they just finished 3 properties, so 2 villas and 1 double story, which is a townhouse. The 2 front properties sold for 1.1 each, and then the back one went on the laneway went for 1.2 million.
You're talking about a standard 3x2 on, I'm assuming, a couple hundred square meters, single story, $1.1 million.
Yes, and then the one at the back that was a double story went for 1.2.
Interesting. Don't you think that the cost variation for that builder would have been significant between the 1 story and the 2 story, but only a $100,000 difference in the value there? Probably the medium density code and the requirements to start having more setbacks and pushing people to go towards townhouses. But it certainly wouldn't have been the best outcome financially for the developer to have done a 2-story, given it would have cost definitely a lot more than $100,000 to do that townhouse rather than a single story for that 3rd block.
Those developers that come into Joondanna is mostly guys who's got their own massive company that can do the build, and they get the material at a really good price. So they must have worked it out to make sure they make money out of it.
Yeah.
But it was fantastic because as soon as that happened, clients I sold for 2 years ago, it was a new complex that I was selling. There was 7 in the complex. They called me and said, if they can get that, what can you get us? And I said, look, guys, look around the 900s.
Not a lot of evidence.
Not a lot of evidence, but I mean, these are still new compared to the others that was in the market. And I sold that unit to them for around $650, and we just sold that exact unit 2 years later for them at $920. So it's a decent amount of income there.
It talks to, I think, most of Perth there in that the last couple of years. Most things have jumped, the better part of 40, 50% if it's in that affordable range. And this is where the conversation's important, I think, in Joondanna, because it represents, as I keep saying, a precipice of affordability for Middle Perth. When interest rates are this high, it's suburbs like Joondanna, I think, despite the fact we've seen nearly 20% growth last year, that I believe start to feel or start to experience individual affordability caps before, obviously, your $600,000 mark, your Belmonts, your Morleys, your Armadales, your Coolballups, all these places that are cheaper, clearly have just as much, if not more, demand, but you notice it in places like your Joondannas because they're aspirational, they're places people would like to live. But suddenly it's not $700,000 anymore. That's in Nollamara now. It's $1 million. It's $1.4 million for products. And if you're feeling it or you're not feeling it, a place like Joondanna for me is a litmus test at that price point and that location and the amenity of how Perth is faring in affording the property they're looking to buy into. Now, what you're telling me is the herd's thinned a little bit. There's more options on every weekend, but certainly, Trent, we're getting the prices and we get more than we thought we would.
True.
So the litmus test is that we're doing okay here in Perth. There's still affordability. There's still a bit of fat in a place like Joondanna that I would have thought would be susceptible at some point to reaching affordability caps.
That's correct. There's people who's got good amount of money, especially when it's young people with double income, and it's quite surprising to see how many people can buy property cash.
Yeah, well, at the very least, putting their balls on the line and buying property without a finance clause.
Correct.
And I'll characterise it even further. A place like Mount Hawthorn, for example, as you says, Joondallup's coupled to it. I think if you can afford Mount Hawthorn, you're probably not, from a socio-demographic perspective, accepting moving north of Green Street. It's your limitation. You're in Mount Hawthorn, you're in North Perth, you're in Mount Lawley. Mount Hawthorn's as far as you're going if you've got the money pretty easily, right? The second you start having pressures financially, you probably won't even leave that area. I think you just change your housing type. But Joondanna represents, as I said, that right on the edge of what people who are aspirational have to make some decisions about where they may have to live. And it's good to hear that yardstick, that litmus test of middle aspirational 30, 40-year-old couple Perth is doing, and that experience you're having of, no surprises. There's more options on the market, so there's less people at the home open, but every single person that's putting an offer in is still very much competing and having to. The median house price, as we spoke about, sits in the 900s. I think it's interesting because it probably reflects, obviously, a big dichotomy between the units and your houses. And
Yes.
as you said, there's probably not a lot available for 900
Yes.
grand specifically. But if you had to, and I gave you 950 grand in your pocket today cash, and you couldn't get a loan to top it up, what would you be buying and where? What street?
I would buy a townhouse. What street? But I would think if you can get somewhere in French, Joondanna Drive, Roberts, because that's the views. Up on Edinburgh, there's beautiful hill views and city views. 950 at the moment won't get you that far
get you that
anymore.
far.
No, it won't get you that far, really, that much. If I look at townhouses we sold in the last 2 years, you were around the 6 to 700. 950, you'd be a little bit disappointed sometimes
Yeah.
looking at the 950. But I think it is still possible. Maybe go a little bit closer to Green Street or Main or somewhere there. You might still end up with a 9 or a 950. But it's not really going to be in the center part where you get the views or the amenities, because we've got stunning parks. There's 2 great parks. They just redid the
Reader
top part.
Reserve.
Yeah, they just did the reserve there. It's phenomenal. It's absolutely beautiful what they've done there. And then you've got a short street park where everybody takes their dogs. And we've got a fantastic coffee shop, Emerson's. They are the best coffee you can get in Perth.
Last question. Your favourite street in Joondanna?
My favourite is Roberts because of the views.
Ralph Seymore, expert in Joondanna. Thank you so much for coming in, mate. It's been a really insightful and enjoyable conversation. Keep smashing on. Keep reporting to us how you're doing in the area, because I think it's actually a really important yardstick for Perth. Thanks, mate.
Thanks, Trent. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Perth Property Show. If you've only just joined the conversation, you can catch up by heading over to our website, perthpropertyshow.com.au, subscribing to the podcast, or joining our Facebook page. Don't forget to tune in next Monday at 7 a.m. for more expert insights, local analysis, and suburb spotlights. Happy hunting!